Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and Commander. I bet for those commanders that are living in Europe, you maybe wouldn't recognize what this website is. It's RT, Russia Today, and I'm sure you do not know because you can't even access this website in your country. That's the price of freedom and democracy, my friend. So anyway, we're going to go into the minds of the Russians today, and I have a number of articles, and somehow these 2 days they just have a lot of Putin talk a lot, like his mouth cannot stop. So we have a lot of things basically clarifying the position of the Russians, and it probably could dispel a lot of this thinking. So far, from my observation, Russian, like at least Putin, in terms of his words and the things that he say, he's not always 100% honest per se. Most of the time he pretty much means what he says. So that is a reliable, I think, because let's say if Russia is a lot more like China, where words, spokesmen or words said is totally unrelated to the action, that's what China is, then this video is no point. So it is very important to understand the Russian point of view, because we are heading into some kind of a very serious a precipice, to the point where we might see some major war between NATO and Russia, or US and Russia, World War III kind of thing. So I thought that it's just important to know, especially for those European viewers, that you really may have a lot of problems trying to get information from the Russian perspective. And of course, the first thing first is of course about nuclear weapon. And Putin in the question and answer panel of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the SPIF, he basically clarified the situation, the position of the Russians in terms of atomic weapons. So they say that Russia will only use atomic weapons in exceptional cases, and the current situation in the Ukraine is just not one of them. So he said that Russia will never escalate this kind of escalation, because someone asked if Russia should climb the nuclear escalation ladder faster. That Russia has never said that it was ready to press the red button, something that they're very familiar. Is it Trump? No, I can't remember. No, so the Putin clarified that the Russians have never said they are ready to press the red button, and he said that other countries, what Russia is trying to do when they talk about nuclear weapons, doing exercises, is just to tell other countries to treat these issues seriously. But somehow he's being accused of nuclear saber rattling, which honestly is also not exactly wrong. Is Russia reminding the rest of the world that they have nuclear weapons? Yeah, I mean, it's the saber rattling. I have a sword. Then I have nuclear weapons. No, that's saber rattling. So, but they are not brandishing nuclear weapons, which makes no sense. But whatever it is, the nuclear doctrine. So this one I also have clarified before. I think during DPA open mic, or probably some videos, that the Russian nuclear doctrine clearly states that the atomic weapons can only be used in the face of the threat to sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is an invasion into Russia. So he do not believe that this is the case right now. However, he warned that the changes to doctrines are not ruled out. He hoped that they will never come to a point of a nuclear exchange. And he said that Russia possesses a very effective early warning system and vast amount of nuclear arsenal, including tactical nuclear weapons that are 3 to 4 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was a shock to me when I first saw this statement on X, on Twitter. I was like, tactical nuclear weapon, but it's more powerful than the atomic bomb in World War II. I was like, how could that still be considered tactical? Moscow said that there's no reason to even think about nuclear weapons, because Russia has vastly outgunned Ukraine when it comes to tanks and aviation. So ammunition production has also increased by the multiple of 20, which is crazy, multiple of 20. So Putin warned and called on the Russian officials not to even talk about nuclear weapons unless absolutely necessary. So basically, Putin is trying to also cool down the rhetoric. I think it's a bit too much rhetoric. So I think that he's trying to also cool things down a bit. This is what it is. And then next is this. When it comes to weaponry, Medvedev has warned that Russia is ready to arm the enemies of the United States. So this Medvedev is the former Russian president. He's also currently the second highest ranking official after Putin on the Security Council in Russia's own Security Council. And he said that Putin has floated a possibility of an asymmetrical response during his meeting with foreign news agency, but saying that the suggestion is currently under consideration. And if this is, Medvedev basically said that if this is the change in the foreign policy, is going to be a rather significant one, because this is going to mean that Russia will be able to copy the United States by sending weapons, all sort of weapons to the hostile countries towards their enemies. So let me point to the point that Putin said that Russia has no illusions about the long-range missile provided by the West, explaining that the Ukrainians were merely pulling the trigger on firing solutions provided by the US and the others. So the first step, Putin said that what they will do is that they will boost air defense to destroy the incoming missiles. But the second might be to supply the similar type of weapons to other regions of the world, which then can be used against sensitive sites of these countries. If the West provocation continued, they will cross the threshold into direct involvement in the war, then they will reserve the right to act in similar ways. This is a recipe for very serious problems. So basically, he said that it is possible that Russia can do this, but no, he said that this is very serious. I don't think Russia wants to go towards these steps, because this is just a precursor to World War III. I think it's just a bad idea. Eventually, tick for tack will always just make things worse. And so this is interesting statement and a possibility. And I was thinking, when I first saw this news, I was thinking, where could the Russians give weapons to? And giving it to Iraq, not very meaningful. No, there is some US bases in Jordan. Striking Israel might be very unrelated to Ukraine. They could give some weapons to the Sahel Confederation. Maybe they can hit some of this French stuff. Possible. Cuba will just get invaded. No, though if they they create a Cuba Missile Crisis number 2. Talking about that, I don't have the article here. The Russians are talking about having a military exercise in Cuba. 3 surface vessels and 1 nuclear submarine will be involved. So it is getting very tense, to be honest. So it is what it is. But I can't really think of a lot of places to give, unless it's all in the Central America countries. Then yeah, it would be a massive problem. And if they start to hit infrastructure like Panama Canal, or any vessels going towards Panama Canal, that would be also tremendously problematic for the Americans. So I think this is something that we should continue to look at. I think the Russians are not saying that they're going to do it now. Like, they think, they're just warning that if they are pissed off enough, they would do the same thing. So there is this meeting with the head of international news agency in St. Petersburg. A nice view behind. So basically, there's a number of issues that is being touched on. The first thing is Zelensky's legitimacy. So he tried to remind these international news journalists or reporters that he want to emphasize that the tragedy or this war in Ukraine start off due to a coup in Ukraine, an unconstitutional coup d'etat. And so basically, now he feels that Zelensky's legitimacy has come into question, because according to Ukrainian law, his powers is supposed to be transferred to the parliament, as his term of the president ended last month. This is based on the Ukrainian constitution. This is because the Russians will study the constitution and decide if Zelensky actually have the right to actually sign anything in terms of the peace deal. So he suggested the Western countries may tolerate and keep Zelensky long enough around to push through unpopular policies. But he feels that there is already several candidates to replace Zelensky. And there's a further article on this in detail, saying that Zelensky will obviously be removed, and reducing mobilization age will just increase the wave of negativity in the Ukrainian society. And so Putin said that Ukraine has already dropped from 27 to 25 in terms of the drafting age, and they are now looking to drop lower to 23. And then Putin believes that it's going to go to 20 or straight to 18. And the law would has to be passed, and now it's in June 2024, and in order to do this, it will take around a year. So he believed that Zelensky will be tolerated until next year's spring, and and around after next year's early next year, when things are done, they will kick out Zelensky. That's what he thinks. So Zelensky, of course, argued that the Ukrainian law of the emergency, basically the state of emergency, forbids election, so he can continue to stay as president. But in terms of Russia's perspective of the constitution, the Ukrainian constitution, they say that there is no provision, in fact, stating that the head of the parliament should assume power if Zelensky's term has expired. But Ukraine do not have this internal conflict regarding this legitimacy of the president. It's a bit hard to tell. But of course, this contest of the legitimacy will come when the war is over. So when Zelensky is the one that signed the peace deal, signing away Crimea or Donbass, and then of course the future government will say that this signing is illegal because Zelensky is not the rightful leader by the time this was signed. He have no rights to sign for Ukraine, and as a result, the treaty will not be recognized, or will not be ratified, or they will turn on their words, to put it that way. So this is why Russia is very concerned, because the whole game the Russia is playing is ultimately to force Ukraine to recognize Crimea and Donbass, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and maybe future oblasts that Russia decided to capture as officially Russian. And as a result, this who to sign these agreements are very important to Russia. So going back to the previous article, so there is some Putin basically rubbished NATO's claim that Russia will be invading NATO countries. He said that these are just falsehood and absurd. They are just trying to spread fear to maintain global hegemony. He said that, have you gone completely insane? Are you as thick as a plank? Who came up with this nonsense? So he's very triggered by this. But honestly, this I would say that not entirely. I don't think he's entirely being fully honest, because there will be excuses or reasons when appropriate to launch an attack on NATO countries. For example, if the Baltic states become they will go overboard and they behave even worse than Ukraine, then there could be always this possibility that Russia will just attack and silence the Baltic states. Who knows? It is possible. If you talk about Poland and some of these bigger countries, Germany, I don't think so. No, these are just way too troublesome for Russia to conquer. Asymmetrical measures. So this is, I think we have already covered about responding asymmetrically. So how the conflict could end. Basically a question to Putin, and he said that Joe Biden could quickly end this conflict by not giving munition to Ukraine. So within 2 to 3 months, he believed that the war will be over. That's what he says, Putin says. He said that whatever the Western leaders are doing is just prolonging the conflict without changing the outcome. And Putin also said that whatever the election in the United States is going to be, doesn't matter is Biden or Trump winning. They don't believe that it's going to change geopolitically the relationship between United States and Russia. He believed that the two will continue to be strategic rivals. So yeah, they just say that United States just don't like Russia to be successful. He don't really care about who wins. He also so he talked about Germany losing sovereignty. Sorry, my nose is so itchy. Because I'm talking and then something inside is just tickling me. Putin says that the relationship with Germany is horrible. The German supply of tanks and weaponries has now destroyed Russian-German relationship. And so provision of long-range weapons to strike Russian territory could lead to serious problems. And so he pointed out the obvious, that something that we on the DPA community has already observed and acknowledged, that Germany basically allowed the United States to destroy its economy through the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, and of course imposing the sanctions. This is what he claims, and he's also claimed that the United States control the flow of information in Germany, and no one is trying to protect German interests. Germany is not sovereign, and they are Germans, but someone has to think of their interests. This is what Putin say, and this one I have to agree. Germany has been operating on a very weird way. They're diplomatically and geopolitically, like they have zero concern about their own national interest. In the beginning, they do. No, in the beginning, they are holding back. They don't want to help Ukraine. They want things to still be negotiated. The Nord Stream, the new Nord Stream pipeline was just completed. They just say that, okay, we are not going to buy gas for now first. And after the gas pipeline got blown up, Germany suddenly just changed. They suddenly become one of the biggest supporter of Ukraine in terms of supplying of military equipment and armor. And that is very clear that someone had sent a message through the destruction of the pipeline warning Germany of further consequences for not towing the line. And Germany has basically lost its sovereignty as a result, because the fact that they have cheap gas that they are not buying and decided to buy expensive gas have destroyed their industries. Germany is currently under some kind of a deindustrialization. A lot of big factories has closed down, and Germany has lost its competitiveness. So things is bad. So what Putin said is not wrong, but it's just interesting that Russia basically is seeing this as what us at DPA is seeing as well. So there is also another panel. So this one is the panel. This is different from the one from the journalist. This is the panel session where Putin also revealed a lot more about the geopolitics of Russia. So he talked a lot on the stage with the Bolivian president and the Zimbabwe president, I think. And but then with the guest on, he basically went on a 1 hour long prepared speech, which is funny. He talked about the countries around the world has entered a race to strengthen their sovereignty based on 3 key areas: state, culture, and economy. He noted that the previous leaders of the global developments are now struggling to maintain their elusive role as hegemons, basically talking about the West, Europeans and Americans. And the world is experiencing explosive technological growth in almost all areas of life, which is true, and a large part thanks to United States in terms of its technology and research, and of course to China because of massive manufacturing power to provide a lot of things at a very cheap price. So China and India has already become leading world economies, and other South Asian and African countries are on their way to become key global economic players. So Putin is giving a lot of credits to the other worlds. So Russia has demonstrated a high level of readiness and adapt to technological developments. So he's talking about, they say that the country's financial sector, e-commerce, transport, military has undergone drastic changes to keep up with times. And in terms of foreign economic relationship, despite all the sanctions and everything, the Russian Federation continued to develop logistics and expanded the number of countries they cooperate with. Trade has increased with Asian countries by 60%, doubled in Middle East, grown by 69% in Africa, and 42% with Latin America. So basically, all the trade that what Russia was doing with Europe is now transferred to the rest of the world. Russia wanted to build economic relationship with other countries with full-scale technological and industrial partnership, providing full life cycle of goods and services with training of national personnel and localized production. So this is very similar to how the Russians have been doing their military-industrial complex. A lot of these airplanes, tanks, and whatnot are all built locally in the host country. And basically, he said that in such an approach, in terms of based on equal terms and technology transfer instead of a monopoly, they can build strong, resilient ties between Russia and these countries, playing the long game, allow the companies to play the long game. So this is a marked difference. Honestly, this is very different from, I think, what China does. China basically does a different kind of a relationship with the rest of the world, like especially Africa. They come in. It's lesser about technological transfer. I'm quite sure there is some, but it's more of providing the loan to build the things. The Chinese will send in their experts, their companies, their workers, and build all those infrastructures and whatnot. And For certain cases, not all cases, there are certain cases, there are some technological transfer, there is some education of the local workforce, but not all of the projects are like this. So Russia is going all in terms of this. And Russia somehow is very interesting because they can do this because the Russians are not the manufacturing house like China is. Russia basically sells resources. Important things is minerals, oil and gas, and wheat, food. So as a result, Russia basically will benefit when most countries are more developed and more countries will require more energy, more food, and more minerals, which will play into Russia's economic hand. This is a bit different from China because China would want to secure the resources to continue to pump into their manufacturing, and then all this infrastructure that the Chinese are building is to help to create that market to buy Chinese goods. So the two countries are a bit different in terms of its economic strategies. But of course, Russia and China has clearly different economic realities. So no, of course, they will have a totally different strategy. So Putin talked about the loss of trust of the Western financial system. And they have cut the export in the currencies of the Western powers like euros and USD in half, and ruble payments have tripled in between 2021 to 2023. And they are now official. So he has now announced. This is, I think, the first official announcement, I guess, or revelation that the BRICS will be developing their own independent payment system. So that's about it. No, they are now increasing the use of national currencies in trade between the BRICS countries, but no, and they will continue to accept new members across the world. But I think the key news here is the development of their own independent payment system. I think that's interesting. So in terms of Russian economy, Putin said that the Russian GDP growth is 5.4% in the first quarter in 2024. And in 2023, the full year growth rate was 3.6%. So Russian GDP growth has actually accelerated. And now by purchasing power parity, Russia is now fourth, overtaking Japan, which is scary. For a country that is under severe sanctions and trade embargoes and whatnot, still have such a huge GDP growth is just a massive miscalculation by the West. So the future of Russia, he says that there's a few things to maintain growth, and so to maintain the growth and remain a key player on the global stage. The Russian needs to strengthen financial, technological, and personnel sovereignty, increase production capacity, which means that the Russians are going to focus more on manufacturing as well, and boosting competitiveness of Russian products in both foreign and domestic markets. So this has something to do with Chinese products, because the biggest competition to all products around the world are Chinese products. So they are trying to improve Russian competitiveness against the Chinese products. And because they are no longer competing with European products, because Europeans have already sanctioned Russia per se, and I think proposed 10 structural changes, increasing investment in new projects across the country, strengthening of the role of SME, creating new financial tools to incentivize businesses. So this is investment into startups or investment into growing businesses, improving professional education system, boosting labor productivity through automation and the use of AI, reducing poverty and improving quality of life. So these structural changes is basically what every single government need to do. So it's nothing special. But there is still some bad news. So the Deputy Prime Minister basically, talked about Russia's demographic problem. So there is a terrible demographic crisis, according to his words. Dmitry Shenichenko basically says that by 2030, which is not very far away from now, it's only 6 years, Russia will have an acute labor shortage of 2.4 million workers, which means that we might actually see mass migration or mass induction of foreign laborers into Russia, which have benefits to Russia, which means that it will increase Russia's GDP by a lot, and it also will free up Russian population to do higher level work, But of course, this is not so easy because ultimately, no, it will have a lot of consequences to have not enough people. So this shrinking population and rising pressure on increasingly scarce workers is now posing serious challenge to Russian economy. And so he can see it from the impending decline in school graduates and those entering universities, whether they like it or not. So they are calling for the birth rate to double, but they say that this cannot be determined, this cannot be done by just government decision alone, and they are trying to do unprecedented measures to improve the situation, including financial support for families. So it's very critical right now for Russia. The birth rate has been declining since the peak of 2014, and the last year in 2023 is the lowest figure since 1999. The demographic gap is the main reason of the shortage of workers in Russia, and each year the labor market is missing thousands of new specialists. So, and they need more employees in manufacturing, transportation, and logistic, health care, social care, research, science, and IT, basically almost everything. Very serious condition for Russia. So not all things is in Russia. Despite all these good words and things, Russia is facing pretty much the same problem I think China is facing. But China is not this open or so straightforward in saying there are problems. Because China, being Chinese, Chinese people are very face sensitive. We very face sensitive. We are not very forthcoming with problems. But China and Russia is facing the same problem, and I think who will dominate the post-US world will be very dependent on who can overcome this demographic issue, Russia or China. I don't think the leader is going to be India. India is out of question because India is still a big mess in terms of its economy and politics and its society. It's not as how to say, oiled, to put it that way, as compared to Russia or China. The same problem applies for Brazil, Indonesia, Nigeria. All these huge population countries, they have the potential. They are all sleeping giants, but until they can sort out their internal issues, their demographic advantage will just be wasted, or the demographic potential will just be wasted. So one last thing is a bit more on the casual side. Biden claimed that he has known Putin for 40 years, but the 40 years is a long time ago. So the Peskov, basically the spokesman of the Kremlin, say that if it's 40 years ago, then Putin was just 32 years old working for the Soviet security agency, the KGB. Biden would be 41 years old, serving as a senator of the US state of Delaware. So however, the first time they officially met was 2011. So the chance that they know each other for 40 years seems quite impossible, because Putin would just be a nobody 40 years ago. So yeah. So basically Kremlin responds to this reaction. And Biden has been known to just say all sort of weird shit that is totally nonsensical or fake or very inaccurate. So these are just random word salads that Biden tend to put out. So nothing very particularly special. So anyway, thank you for watching. We have now dived and swim in the mind of the Russians, and we are now all stuck with gooey, greeny RT propaganda. So thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. I want to know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next update.